Hello, everybody. Welcome. And thanks, Michelle, as usual, for the great introduction. We're in the education business, not just the software business, but the education business. And for us, it's really important to share those stories, ideas, and advice across the industry. We really like to keep these formats interactive. So definitely keep your questions coming. Don't hold them till the end, just to reinforce what Michelle said. We've got a little Q&A box at the bottom. We'll answer your questions sometimes during the program. It's a lot more fun that way. My name's Taj Adhaf, and I'm the founder of Leasecake. Started about 7.5 years ago. And we are at our Cape quarters in Winter Park, Florida. But really, wherever we are, and I think our guest has been traveling too, we really strive to bring you the important stories that need to be heard. In that spirit, I'd like to welcome today's illustrious guest from Dave's Hot Chicken. They're a Leasecake customer, and if you've been living under a rock in the restaurant industry, you may not have heard, but their brand is on fire. A couple of weeks ago, they were just acquired by Roar Capital for $1 billion. And our guest today has seen a few things that are essential to scale a brand. He's got an amazing story to tell. Please welcome the president and COO of Dave's Hot Chicken, Jim Bitticks. Welcome, Jim.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I don't think anyone's ever called me illustrious, so I'm going to Google it and figure out what that means, but I appreciate it.
You
Happy.
are illustrious. So why don't we just start? Tell everybody a little bit about how you got started in franchising, um, and kind of where the story begins, because this is the untold story.
Well, I actually got my very first start in franchising when I was 15 years old. I applied for a job that I wasn't old enough to get at a Jack in the Box restaurant in between my high school and my house. And when I applied for the job, I lied about my age. I said I was 16 because I thought you had to be 16. And they hired me, and I started maybe like a week or two later. And I didn't know I was working for a franchise until that first day. As I got to work, everybody was like freaking out and running around trying to get the restaurant ready. And I said, what's going on or what's happening? He said, oh, the owner's coming, the owner's coming. And I said, the owner? Like, wait, what? And at the time, I was 15 years old. I didn't know how franchises worked or anything. I just assumed the owner must be a guy or a lady or somebody. I didn't even understand that, and I said, so like, wait, Jack, like Jack's coming, like I don't understand. What was really funny about it is I think at the time the CEO of Jack in the Box was named Jack Goodall, if I remember correctly. So they're like, no, Neil's coming. And I'm like, who the hell is Neil? Like, I don't understand. And they said, yeah, he owns this one, the one on University Road and the other one on whatever other corner. And it was like bewildering to me, the idea that there was an owner for these three Jack in the Boxes that are sort of like near my house. But that was my first introduction to what franchising is and how it worked. And then fast forward, I'm 51 now. And I work for an all franchisor organization. That's Dave's Hot Chicken. We have 317 locations open as of today. And out of those 317, we own 11. And that's thanks to the recent Rourke Capital deal where we picked up six of the founders' locations. We only have operated five locations for the last 5 years. But my bigger introduction or the story actually leads to me becoming a franchisee myself of Dave's Hot Chicken. So fast forwarding from that 15-year-old kid who was working for a franchisee and being a franchisee myself within the Dave's Hot Chicken system, it's quite an arc. And I've learned all sides of the franchising game now, I think. Still learning,
Well,
but yeah, I've had quite an education on it.
so this is the start, and then this is kind of where we are today. But you've got to fill in many of the blanks, which is as you moved up in your early career, 16-year-old, taking on more responsibility. Share with everyone the companies that you joined and how you built who you are today.
Sure. My initial start at Jack in the Box, there were a couple of stops along the way as a kid. My family moved away for a while. I ended up back at Jack in the Box when I was like 18 years old, and then made a jump to a company called Rally's Hamburgers, which at the time was the fastest growing restaurant or fastest growing hamburger chain in America. They ran into a little trouble and got picked up by CKE Restaurants, and I ended up working for CKE in this weird sort of franchise deal where CKE was running like 21 restaurants of Rallies, and that was a 5-year agreement. At the end of the 5-year agreement, they offered me a real job. They offered me the opportunity to become a district manager, and I had worked my way through like assistant manager, general manager, and up to like a multi-unit manager, and even into sort of a franchise business manager role, the quasi-hybrid role. And they said, "Do you want to come to California and be a full district manager of a Carl's Jr. district?" And I had never run a Carl's, and I was like, "Well, I mean, sure, I'll do that." What my other options probably didn't seem as lucrative since they were going to revert the rallies back to the rallies hamburgers management team. Um, so I ended up moving my wife, myself, and my daughter. My wife at the time was pregnant with our son, so we all picked up and moved to California, which is crazy for us. That was not we lived at the time we lived on the same block as my mother-in-law. So imagine how popular I was making that switch. And we've been in California pretty much ever since. We lived in Texas for 2 years when Carl's Jr. was trying to expand to Texas. But other than that, California's been my home for like literally the last 25 years or so. 2001, yeah, 2001. So, along the way, I moved through the multi-unit ranks, district manager, regional director, our regional vice president, then VP of operations. And about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I made a jump from company ops, which is the Carl's Jr. experience, over to Blaze Pizza. And when I jumped to Blaze, we had just 2 locations, which was also a crazy jump at the time, to go from a pretty secure sort of corporate job to working for a startup with a little bit of equity offered, as well as a whole new world um, to learn about and to understand. The franchisor side of the operation was a completely new experience.
Let me ask you, when you left CKE after a period of time, CKE sold to another group. I'm trying to remember, where were
There
you
were two
in that
sales.
time?
In 2009, it was Apollo,
Okay,
Apollo Group, and I was there for that for a couple of years. And then I think 1 or 2 years after I left, they made the sale to Rourke Capital.
got
Um,
it. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because you've seen working as a franchisee, you've seen working, as a, within the back office of a franchisor, you've seen some PE stuff. Now keep going. Now you've joined Blaze,
right. In
and what
2013, I made the jump to Blaze when there were just 2 locations open. Um,
two locations.
yeah,
Holy cow.
when they were, yeah, my work mom, her name is Carolyn Kennedy. She's our chief development officer, and she runs our international side at Dave's. She had jumped over to Blaze Pizza from Buffalo Wild Wings, and she called me and said, "You got to come, do operations for Blaze." And I was like, "What's Blaze?" And she's like, "Oh, it's this new startup concept." And I said, "How many locations?" And I had 3 kids now at this time. By this time, I have 3 children that I'm supporting. And she goes, there's 1 location. And I go, "Carolyn, I can't go from," and I was, I was a VP of ops. I was making pretty good money. I was living in Austin, Texas at that time. It was really inexpensive, no state income tax. Like it was a great, financially, we were in a really good position. And I was like, "Carolyn, like, how am I gonna move to a company that only has 1 location?" And she goes, "No, we're gonna open hundreds of locations." And everybody says that, like sure you are. I ended up doing an interview with Rick Wetzel, the founder, one of the founders, co-founder. He and Elise Wetzel co-founded Blaze, and I loved the idea. I loved him. I thought he was great, like really visionary and a little goofy, to be honest with you. But I thought how cool is this? They offered me a job for significantly less money, but things had really sort of shifted at Carl's quite a bit at that point. So it was a great opportunity to get back to California, and I made the jump and jumped in both feet right off the ground. We were running hard because they had already started selling franchises. We had people coming to training in like 45 days, but we didn't have a training program or I mean, we didn't have anything, to be honest with you. They had the recipe book was their ops manual, and it was two pieces of paper folded in fourths that the chef, his name was Chef Brad Kent, who's a great chef. I mean, like, genius level chef with all the ways the food tastes. But how do you scale this, quad fold paper into a brand that's going to open hundreds of locations? But I mean, that was actually one of the best challenges and maybe one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. I would say that's probably well, like you start have to include your wife and your kids, but from a career wise, I think Dave's was the best decision, but Blaze was definitely a close second. So learned the franchisor side of everything at Blaze. I moved from company ops over to franchise support ops or franchise ops, building all the materials and creating everything to grow the brand, and then leading all the teams to grow the brand. Once you have franchisees signed up, they've got to pick their real estate. They've got to build the restaurant. They've got to open the restaurant, and then they got to run it and keep it up and running. So that whole side of it was new and exciting, and we built a whole team around that. Then had the opportunity to jump from Blaze right in the middle of 2020 to Dave's Hot Chicken to sort of do it all again. Blaze did a private equity deal in 2017, and as private equity deals go, things always change post the deal. And sometimes they change and get even better, and sometimes they sort of stagnate or maybe don't they're not as good as they were. No comment on that, but ultimately landed on an opportunity at Dave's Hot Chicken with Bill Phelps, who was one of the founding investors with the Wetzels at Blaze. So I had a relationship with him for about 8 years. Very distant relationship, but ultimately, I texted him and said, "Hey, I'd love to come work for you at Dave's and do this whole thing again that we had just done." Landed at Dave's when there were 4 locations open and no company stores yet. Those were all the founders' locations, and one brand new franchisee had just opened a store.
Wow. When you left Blaze, so you started at two, and when you left, how many locations did they have?
About 375.
I mean, that's phenomenal. So it's
That was
obvious.
really crazy.
What's that?
It was really crazy. Like, back to Carolyn saying we're going to open hundreds, and I sort of like rolled my eyes, but we indeed opened hundreds of locations of Blaze Pizza.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have entrepreneurial roots. I mean, you want to roll the dice because you believe in who you are and what you can do, and others do as well. So now here you are getting in touch with Bill and saying, hey, can I join your team? Like
Uh,
who called whom?
what's funny is I don't know that I've ever told this story like out loud.
This is
And
the untold story, people. This is why
I'm
you're
sorry.
calling in. Go
Bill
ahead.
would tell me to never tell that story again. I have told the story in small groups, but
Leave
uh,
it.
things had changed a little bit at Blaze, and I was definitely looking for an opportunity. And they had just opened that very first franchise location, and Carolyn called me. Carolyn, the chief development officer I mentioned a moment ago, and she called me and said, "Jim, you got to come to Dave's. They need someone to run ops." And I had this echo moment of like this is what happened last time when I was in Texas. And Carolyn had called me and said, "You got to come over here." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is crazy. Like, I'm going to jump." I had a good job. I was the chief restaurant officer and executive vice president of operations and training. And while things had gotten a little different, I mean, I was gainfully employed, and I wasn't like on an action plan or getting ready to get fired or anything. They were just changing a lot of things. And um, I called my mom's psychic, which sounds absolutely nuts when you say that out loud, but I did. And her name is Joyce, and I called Joyce and I said, "Joyce, I have this opportunity to maybe make a change. Should I do it?" And the first thing she said is like, "Wow, this one feels really good for you." And she does this where she's doing her cards over the phone,
Tarot,
so
tarot cards or
over the
something.
telephone.
Yeah.
So if you're not a believer, you're sitting there thinking she's like just flipping, regular playing cards and whatever. Anyway, she goes, "This one's really lucrative." She's this is, and I'm not lying when I tell you this. She goes, They are telling me that this is your forever job and that this is a really great opportunity for you." So I don't know who they are exactly, but I said, thank you very much. And I immediately texted Bill, and said, "Hey, I'd love to come work for you at Dave's. How do we make that happen?" And he goes, call, it was on a Sunday morning, I think. And he goes, "Call me on Monday." So called him on Monday, and he made the request. He was on the board of directors at Blaze. He made the request of the then CEO and team. They said sure, they would make it happen. And 30 days later, I was starting anew at Dave's. Four locations open at the time. They were a little more developed than the folded up recipe book, but there was a ton of work to do. I was luckily able to literally hire my entire team from Blaze Pizza in a sort of hourly part-time capacity, and we were up and running, I would say, within 30 days. The best hire I made was our senior vice president of operations and training, Juan Lopez, who I've worked with for since Carl's Jr. days. He joined almost immediately, as did several members of his team, and we sort of, set up camp really quickly. And we started training franchisees, I would say 60 days, 60 or 75 days after we started. But we started, I mean, they were more developed. There was more developed, but it wasn't ready. Like we had to go back and sort of redo and reset up, and it was so great though because we had just done all that work at Blaze. Like we really just did it.
Sure.
And yeah, it's sort of like, when you build like this ridiculous Lego thing. My son Connor does these ridiculous Lego things, but then he wants to take it apart and put it back together. The building it the first time and then taking it apart makes the putting it back together that much better or that much faster. Or like when you do a puzzle, the second time you do a puzzle, it's faster. That's what happened with Blaze versus Dave's. We went through all the learning at Blaze, and when we landed at Dave's, we were sort of like almost, expert level, if you will. And
Sure.
we were able to avoid certain mistakes and do things right from the start, that we had maybe had to learn our way through at Blaze. So
Wow. That's a great analogy, like the puzzle, tearing it apart, then putting it back together. You can do a lot faster.
yeah,
Uh,
well, and coupled up with Bill Phelps had just built Wetzel's Pretzels from nothing. He and Rick and Elise put Wetzel's Pretzels together back in the 90s, and then he led it as the CEO for 26 years before he jumped over to Dave's Hot Chicken. So we really combined all of the learnings from the Wetzel's experience and the Blaze experience, to land on the Dave's experience. And Bill will tell you that they learned the business at Wetzel's from the franchisees, that they had no idea what they were doing. If a candidate could fog a mirror, and they would give them a franchise at Wetzel's. And so he often says that the approach we took at Blaze sort of built on the mistakes that were made at Wetzel's, and like avoided those mistakes. And then the process that we put into place at Dave's was built on the Blaze process and the Wetzel's process. And
sure.
so we were really able to supercharge the Dave's growth, um, much more rapidly than either of the other two brands previously.
Yeah. Let's take a pause here for a second because we're getting some questions. People kind of want to know the fun stuff. It's and we'll get back to, our regularly scheduled program,
Sure.
but tell me about your life and the team's life right now in the last 10 days. Like the road trips, the junkets, the press.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
that's
Well,
the juicy stuff that we're getting questions like, can we have Jim tell us
yeah,
more?
absolutely.
What's that?
So let
Yeah,
me start back a little further back.
please.
We started the actual process for the sale or potential sale, back in November, where we just started exploring it. Ended up working through a truncated process, which was sort of Bill's perfect scenario of like, we did it at Blaze, and it was a very long process with all of the fireside chats that you do with the various different groups that are interested. We went through that process in, I think, 30 days at Dave's, and started accepting offers at the end of 30 days, which was a super fast truncated process.
What were the fireside chats? Let me make sure we catch up with.
So in the Blaze version, you put together a book and then you schedule all these meetings and all the groups come in and they meet with you. And that process was a much more drawn out process at Blaze. Bill sort of wanted it to be quick. My grandpa used to say quick and dirty. He wanted it to be quick and dirty, so we got through the process very quickly, and we did. We saw a bunch of groups and sort of asked for first bids within probably 2 weeks of that initial meeting, and then I think we went to final bids 2 weeks later. So it was a very, very rapid process to complete it. In that entire scenario, there's all that, once you get to a group and a deal, then they do all their due diligence stuff. They do all their confirmation of all things, and then the HSR stuff, all the back end stuff that's going on. In the meantime, Bill, ultimately with the support of the board and the investors, was able to negotiate some big bonus money that then we were able to give very significant bonuses to like every support center team member, all the way down to the assistant managers of the restaurants, and then several of the long-term trainers that have been out opening stores for the last several years. And I was going to say that was the fun stuff. That
Yeah.
part right there was the best part. Maybe a month ago, we scheduled all these meetings with all the different employees and brought them in or did it on Zoom if they were remote, and basically said, thanks for everything that you've done. Here's a very healthy bonus. Roughly, I would say the average bonus that we passed out was about $100,000 per employee. So it's, like the goal was to be around a 1 year's pay. Might have been a little more, a little less for some, but it was a pretty good number. We were able to do that at Blaze Pizza too, but not to that level because the deal wasn't as big. And so it's a very, I don't know, fulfilling thing to take all these people, especially most of them are pretty young, that have helped build a brand. They jumped into a startup, and part of jumping into a startup is you don't need a ton of experience, and you don't you probably aren't going to get hired at the more senior brands, but you get the opportunity of being in on the ground floor and maybe the opportunity to move up, and in this case, the opportunity to benefit from the ultimate sale. So that was the most fun stuff. And then fast forward to the close of the deal, when money started getting deposited into people's accounts, and I started getting texts. I got a text a couple of Friday nights ago, Friday night, Saturday morning, from one of the employees that has worked with me since Blaze, since like 2013. And she said, "I just want to say thank you so much for bringing me with you. You guys are great." She sent it to Juan and me and said, I can't believe that this is happening and this is so great." And I didn't realize that the wire, the ACH had transferred. And I just replied back to her. I was like, "You're drunk." And she's like, "Yes, I am, but that doesn't change what I'm saying. I really do appreciate you guys." I realized the next morning when I saw the alert on my phone that money had been deposited in my account. I was like, "Oh, that's where this came from. This like sudden sentimentality." But a lot of people kind of reacted the same way, and it was a really beautiful thing to be able to do and to be able to offer up to the employees that help build the brand. So that's the
Wow.
most fun. And then we did a press tour last week just to make the announcement final. And that was a whirlwind in New York. Lots of different Forbes, Fortune, Inc., Wall Street Journal, restaurant business, NRN. I'm gonna
Wow.
forget them, but all of the ones, fastcasual.com, they were all part of the announcement process, and that was really cool. The best part of the announcement process, though, is that our way of sort of validating or saying that this deal was happening was we had the founders go back to the parking lot and they met with the original Eater LA food blogger, Farley Elliott. And he was the one that wrote the article or the food blog post
Yeah.
That's late night hot chicken stand might blow your mind. That sort of launched the brand back
Oh, yeah. I mean, my God.
yeah, May 12th of 2017. And as a precursor to the official announcement, we had the three original founders, the guys that were working the parking lot, meet up with Farley. We restaged the parking lot, and they just did a touch base, and they basically said thank you to Farley for being the guy that was willing to come out and show some love, which I thought was a really sort of Dave's way of doing that. We're very not corporate. And so we try to like, we're trying not to fall into that trap of like forgetting where we came from. And that was, sort of like one way of trying to make sure that we didn't forget where we came from.
Absolutely. Well, you have a very unique brand as evidenced by the backdrop behind you, the River North location. I mean, the level of personalization to each market, you guys are so much fun. You've got celebrities that are not just endorsers, but they're franchisees as well. I mean, I'm 1 degree of separation from Usher. Just so
Well, he is a
everybody.
franchise there, so
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. No, it's pretty cool stuff. Um, so uh, there's a question that just came in terms of your approach, because I mean, I'm going to reinforce what I've heard in the industry, and it's going to balance off of this question. Dave's has a great reputation that it may be more subjective. I wish there was some industry stats and some surveys out there, but of all of the franchisees, multi-unit operators that we've spoken to across the industry, they say, my God, they love and prefer your brand. Not necessarily, I'd say more than others, but you have a unique style in terms of support. And is that a testament to how, because you're a franchisor and a franchisee, or what makes you guys wired in the way that you are to support franchisees much more holistically than the average 30, 40-year-old system?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think that the brand was created to be a franchise concept on purpose. So it wasn't a company concept that eventually started franchising.
Right.
And this was very similar at Blaze Pizza also. I
Yep.
think Wetzel's wasn't started to be a franchise concept, but I think they landed there and then realized like what a lucrative business that was and how clean it was to be a franchisor with a handful of restaurants, so you have skin in the game, but with the main focus not being on running your own corporate stores. And so Blaze was that way also. And then Dave's was created to be like that as well. And so I think that our ability to be really good franchisor support people is elevated by the fact that we don't have a bunch of company restaurants that we're trying to run. And, we're not like I think when I started at Carl's, it was close to 50-50 company to franchise. It may even have been more company. It eventually, like I think now they have something like 49 company operated locations out of like 11 or 1200 that are out there. So, definitely the pendulum swung completely the other way. We started with the pendulum over here so that all of that momentum and all of that inertia is around helping franchisees grow. I also think that the opportunity to become franchisees ourselves, several of us are franchisees in the system, not just me, changes the way you think about your support level, changes the way you think about the decisions that get made for the company because it's not just the franchisee that's getting affected. It's also you yourself or your fellow franchisee takes on a deeper meaning that you don't really have when you're in the corporate role. And I wasn't a franchisee at Blaze. And if you had asked me at Blaze Pizza, rate yourself on keeping franchisees interests and priorities top of mind, I would have said A minus. I would have been very sure of myself that I did a good job on doing that. And I would say in retrospect, I'd give myself at best a B. If I was being very generous, I'd say B plus. And now I think that's a solid A. And I think I mean, you have to balance, right? You have to balance the franchisor's goals and priorities with the franchisees, and they are similar, but they're not 100% aligned. As a franchisor, you're not necessarily focused on making the highest bottom line profit possible. There are sometimes you have to invest on certain things, or there's some decisions that get made that are, for the greater good. And maybe as a franchisee, you're much more focused on, I don't say every penny, but more so than perhaps the franchisor is. So my fellow corporate employee support people, franchisees, have all sort of learned to balance it in the middle. I had someone ask me before, isn't that a conflict of interest for you to be a franchisee? And I said, I think on the contrary, I think it's a confluence of interest. I actually think it's better for the franchisees that our CFO, who's one of my partners, and I are franchise owners. We really understand it at a very deep level from all perspectives, I think. So
Sure.
I think it's helped us build better systems. I think it's helped us be better partners. I think it's helped us take better care of the franchisees and help supercharge the growth.
Sure.
Where we focus very heavily on unit level economics and the ROI. And we've sort of latched onto the idea that that's what we're here to take care of and to protect. And there's balancing. There's a lot of balancing that goes on for that. But I think franchisees would tell you that we've done a fairly good job of doing that and of keeping them top of mind and making sure they're being taken care of.
Yeah. Well, I've got to imagine on the fact that senior management are franchisees as well, that had to be in the plus column when Rourke was looking at you. I mean,
Yeah, I think it was ultimately. They, as part of our deal for James and me and several of the people, Juan and a guy I've been working with for 22 years, Edgar, and several of us that I let in as investors on my side of it. We had a buyback provision, or Dave's franchise co had a buyback provision that they could buy us back for 4.5 times our EBITDA, which was, a fine deal. You might be able to get more than that from a prospective franchisee in the street, but still fair, you know. And as we progressed through the process for the deal, we sort of landed on the best thing to do would be to eliminate the buyback provision because it would demonstrate that we're still in. If we got bought out, we sort of lose the ability to say we're franchisees too. We believe in this change and this sale. Like, don't worry, nothing's gonna change. Like all of those things. And so we were able to, I don't say leverage it because I think everybody was aligned with the idea that we didn't want to send that message. And so we were able to retain our franchise and not sell it back.
that's a
Uh,
gutsy move.
yeah, that was the board of directors on the Dave side. I think the Rourke folks were happy with that too. I know James and I were, as well as our partners, because we make good money on that, and it's a great opportunity, and it does keep us very engaged with the franchisee experience of what's going on in the system.
Wow.
We have 3 locations, and our fourth one should open mid-July or so. Have a 9-store territory and we've got like 3 more that we're working on in the pipeline. And I've learned much more about the development side of this. I mean, I felt like I knew most of the stuff, but like the actual construction of a restaurant, what those costs are, and the even the permitting stuff and all of those impacts, I think I've really notched up on my understanding of how all that works now.
Yeah. Well, when you all came on board as our customer, the first place that I went to for lunch was Dave's in Orlando, Lake Mary, and signed the waiver for the Reaper. And it's the craziest thing, dude. I mean, I like spicy food, and if anyone has been to Dave's, and I hope you have, you need to go if you haven't. The waiver that you need to sign, it's like, I don't know, 3 feet of receipt paper, and you have no idea what you're signing for, but I'm addicted. So there's something about it's craveability. It's, at the end of it, you're going, oh my God, I can't believe I just ate the whole thing. And then 2 days later, you're going, you know. I should go back. It's
Are you addicted to the Reaper or just to Dave's in general?
I mean the Reaper. I mean for sure all the other ones below that, but there's something about that kind of level of heat and I don't call it pain. It's like
Yeah.
it's enjoyable. It's an enjoyable pain.
We've
Maybe I'm
been
a masochist.
we participated in a restaurant food tour or food crawl with fastcasual.com maybe a year
Yeah,
ago.
yeah,
And as part of that, when folks would show up, we had, chicken and fries and everything. And then we had these Dave's Bites, which are like, chicken nuggets or whatever. But
yeah,
we had done them in the Reaper level. So if anybody wanted to try them, they could, and they did a few. A lot of people said, no, 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 no. After the one of the tours left, I was, sort of just sitting there like snacking or munching, and I grabbed one, not realizing that it was the Reaper. I just thought they were bites, even though I knew before that they had been Reaper, I just wasn't tuned in. And the moment right here, right before it touched my lips, the smell, and then I felt it on my lips, and the moment it touched my lips, I was like, oh no. And by then it's in my mouth and I'm like looking for a napkin and I didn't even chew. I never
yeah,
punctured the flesh of the chicken with my teeth, okay? It
yeah.
just touched my lips, my tongue, and I guess my palate. And I could feel that for maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
Easy. Yeah.
Yeah, so it can definitely burn.
Well, all right. Well, so let's talk about the misunderstanding of private equity and franchise brands because like you have a very simple concept. It's chicken, it's fries, and the menu is easy. It's so easy to execute on. Obviously, Rourke found the business incredibly profitable and successful. But what do you think? Well, what are your understandings of what people don't get about PE with regards to building a franchise brand? Just let's elaborate on that.
Sure. I think my very first introduction to private equity or any of that was with the Apollo purchase of Carl's. And I think it was 2009. It may have been 2010, somewhere in that range. And I remember I got a check for $40,000, which was by far the biggest check I'd ever received. Biggest one check I'd ever received. And I was like, what's this for? And it was for my stock options. And Carl's had been very good about every year issuing however many stock options, for whatever level you were in. And I mean, like, I was stoked, like 40K. And like, as I understood what happened, I was like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. When I landed at Blaze, they offered up some options. I think a little after the first year, as they started to see that it was going to be successful, and they put their money where their mouth was, and we got some options. And when we did the private equity deal, I got a good check there. And I think two different things happened at the time with Carl's. The value of Carl's continued to rise, and they were able to do another deal 4 years later or 5 years later. At Blaze, the opposite sort of happened. We took on the investment and then we sort of plateaued and then they started to dip a little. And I think they're still struggling. I think it's a really great product. And I think it's a really great brand, and really good people. But the two experiences are sort of different. And so when you ask that question about, what are the pros and the cons of private equity, I think it's sort of the unknown. And the most important thing is aligning with a partner that's aligned with the company's vision and values. And I think for us, Rourke Capital is a very tenacious group of hardworking professionals that know what they're doing restaurant wise. Like
Yeah.
they're very, I think they operate something like 85,000 restaurants, or they have a stake or a position in 85,000 restaurants. That's sort of their specialty, right? They do restaurants. And the group of managers that we've worked with are all like long termers, like 25 years, 19 years, 15 years, working on the Rourke side of things. And I can tell you they've been absolutely great to work with, so far. I say that. I mean that in a non-negative way, but we're still at the beginning of the relationship, and just like I said, franchisor and franchisee priorities may not always be perfectly aligned. I would say that might also be similar. Although I think the whole point for the private equity firm is to increase value. So I think we're really aligned on that. We want to continue to increase value. The entire executive team at Dave's rolled over half of their equity into the new deal. So we're very focused on continuing to grow it. A lot of the questions last week on the media tour were like, so what's next for you guys? Where are you guys going next? Or, who's leaving first? And the answer is no, nobody's leaving. We're all locked in, and we all want to do it again. We'd love to see a 3-year sprint to whatever, a public offering or another deal, or just to continue to grow the brand, continue
Sure.
to help franchisees be successful. All of those things, the opportunity to take good care of our people, the folks that have built the brand, to see them continue to grow and move into higher positions and or have opportunities for additional bonus monies down the road, whatever that looks like. Those are all sort of our goals or our leanings. And I think Rourke is the right partner for that. And I mean that sincerely. I
Absolutely.
got quoted last week as saying that they are private equity stalkers. And the part that they left out of the quote was that I said that they met us when we were at restaurant number 15 at like RFDC or something. They scheduled a meeting and they said, "Hey, we've been watching you guys. We think you're great. We'd love to continue to get to know you. We'd love to start talking to you." That was back in 2021. And every year, once or twice a year at whatever conference, they would like check in with us.
Sure.
They offered the ability to help with a few like sort of strategic decisions along the way. Like we were talking about switching POSs, for example, and they had switched to the POS vendor that we were looking at switching, and they were generous with their time even before there was a deal, uh,
Yeah.
because they were, they were working for it. And that's what I meant when I said they're private equity stalkers. They started early and they kept the relationship warm and they tried really hard. There's Jeff Hill and Mike Sharkey, Paul A. I can't say his last name, and Mark Lawrence. These guys have been involved with us for years, and so it wasn't a foregone conclusion that it was going to be Rourke. There were two bidders at the end that were really close, but they really put the hard work in, and they really made it happen. Even from the diligence side, they were deep into the diligence side from the moment that we said, "Hey, we're ready to start talking about this." So
Yeah. Well, it- the entire business of franchising and restaurants, it is a relationship business. And for those that want to start a conversation and start a relationship early on, why would you say no? I mean, the same thing happened with us at Leasecake 7 years ago. People are wanting to be involved in the conversation, give you strategic guidance, insights, and ultimately, there's a good outcome that can happen from it. Like just give to give, for goodness sakes.
yeah,
We want you to succeed at all costs, and if we can help you along the way and be there at that right time, it's a wonderful thing. So kudos to you. Some of the questions, there was one very specific kind of real estate question. We're going to take that one offline. But with regards to standards, obviously, we can't get into the details of how Rourke thinks or the like, but they've definitely built a platform company, a platform holding company of incredibly great brands and parent companies, not just restaurants, but spas, fitnesses, and a whole bunch
yeah.
of whole
Well,
bunch of
it's
different
still
content.
it's still being run by the founder, the CEO,
Sure.
Neil Aronson, who came down, by the way, to meet with us and with our founders and whatnot to sort of make
Yeah.
the deal. So
Yeah.
it isn't just this corporate entity. It's still being,
People.
yeah, exactly. And I think Neil's brother Steve is like lead on all things legal. There's been a lot of
Yeah.
meetings with him along the way.
Yeah.
So, it's like a family business, but gigantic with however many
Sure.
billions of dollars of market cap.
So let's pick up on this thread in terms of systems and platform, which is Rourke. You specifically have been building platforms and standards within CKE, Blaze, and Dave's. To the extent that you've invested in solutions that are standards within Dave's, how important is that as it relates for your ability to scale, like having clean, centralized data,
Sure.
uh, all of the things related to real estate are at your fingertips. Why don't you talk about that and increasing valuation? Because obviously it's like a free EBITDA, right? Savings. Don't hire a bunch of people when technology can solve your problems. Take it
Yeah.
away.
So it's a good question. Well, and it kind of connects back to your question before about the franchisor system thing. When you start as a company operated thing, you're going to open a restaurant, then you're going to open your second restaurant, and you're running it as your own company for a while of corporate or company operated locations. The choices and the decisions you make are sort of, best option at the time, probably. When you start out saying we're going to be a franchisor, you come at it from a completely different perspective. It isn't about me running it myself. It's not about the elbow grease that I'm going to put in, or my willingness to sort of like, well, this solution doesn't quite make it, and this solution doesn't quite make it, and I play bridge between the two solutions because it's my business. I'm the owner and I'm willing to do that piece of it because I own it and my whole livelihood's connected to it. When you build it to be a franchisor uh, company that's in support of multiple franchisees, you take some of those pieces out. You don't you find the solution that actually connects without the owner having to be the connective tissue because you're building like a platform or system, like you said, that is designed to be supportive of them. So, for example, the POS system. It can't be a chintzy sort of mom and pop solution if you're not going to be a mom and pop brand. If you're looking to be a multi-hundred unit brand, then you have to pick the right POS that's going to be able to do that. We've actually changed POS 3 or 4 times. So I'm telling you this from like experience of like, ooh, we didn't see that coming, and we had to we had to pivot or we had to change to something else. The same thing is true of other tools like our training provider, PlayerLink, that we used both at Blaze Pizza and now at Dave's to basically serve the franchisees and make it easier for them to run their business. Here's this platform that delivers your training materials. We did all these great new training videos last year that we launched. PlayerLink we knew we were going to do that when we chose PlayerLink because they have a compression technology that works really well. You don't have to have a live internet connection to watch the videos. So that's much better in a restaurant where the POS is using up a lot of the bandwidth or your guests are because they're on your internet or whatever. And so having the big picture view of, okay, this is a franchise and we are building all of the support systems, even us using Leasecake is an example of building infrastructure that is supportive of the growth of the franchisees in a lot of different from a lot of different perspectives or angles. And so as we build the platforms and as we build the systems, our goal is to make it easier and better and more efficient for the franchisees to continue to build the business. Our engine of growth in terms of like financial growth, valuation growth, is the growth of the number of locations. Like that's how we continue to grow the value of the brand is by building more locations as quickly as possible. I mean, you can debate that what as quickly as possible means, but as we continue to grow, the brand's value continues to grow. And any tool like Leasecake that we can put into a place like PlayerLink, like QPOS, like Loop AI, any of these systems that we can latch onto, put into place, and it helps create the environment for the franchisees to grow and to not focus on I don't say silly decisions, but the minutia of making these types of decisions. That's the whole franchisor model. We create the system, you subscribe to it, you give us a bit of the percentage, and then you have a great business and you make a lot of money, and so do we. And so as we build out all of those different tools and systems, that's sort of the vision. Even
Got
like
it.
we use Avanti Restaurant Solutions for our equipment vendor. And there's a package of stuff that you just go buy. You don't have to figure out which hood you're going to buy or what fryer models are the best models to use or any of those things. It's all done for you, and you just go to this vendor and you buy it and you use it and you hopefully become very successful. So that's sort of the framework and the structure of the franchisor model. One of the real benefits I think of locking into and joining forces with Rourke is because they have 85,000 restaurants in their portfolio. You start getting some synergies and you start having some buying power, and you maybe get even a better system, maybe a more cost effective or cost efficient system even for your
Yeah.
franchisees because
Yeah,
you have more buying power behind you.
absolutely. So from a real estate perspective, growing from 10 to 100 locations, what systems do you have to get right early on?
I think the most important system from the very beginning. I mean, obviously it's the food. That's the foundation of the entire brand is really good chicken, and not screwing that up. As you start to scale and grow, you might get enticed into, oh well, we've got to have warming cabinets to keep chicken hot so that we can serve guests faster. We've actually gone the exact opposite. Not that we don't care about the speed of service, or, we want it to be fast enough, but we aren't focused on like lightning fast speed. We are 100% focused on the chicken's always really good. Um, Absent that, when we move on from that, what's the next big system? Franchisee selection process is probably the number one most important thing. We've focused on multi-unit, multi-brand, well-capitalized franchise partners who've done this before and who get how to work in a franchise system and then also how to grow quickly. I think really close to that, right after the franchisee selection process and approach, it's the real estate approval and acceptance process. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
It costs a lot more to try to market a bad location, like a bad real estate location, than it does to pay the higher rent of a really great location. And that's a lesson that I think many people have learned it, but we definitely learned it at Blaze, where we had maybe made some choices on a secondary or not quite the right spot just to grow fast. And we learned that lesson pretty quick at Blaze. It's not like we built a bunch of bad locations, but there were a couple early on where we go, who saw this one before we said yes? And everybody's like, oh, we didn't. No one came out to see it. So we quickly made a requirement that somebody from our team had to go out and see it before it got approved. We started that with that process at Dave's. Like that's one of those examples of like we ported over the learning. See, the Wetzel's model was almost all malls, and so you just it's a mall spot and it's from Simon or from whatever mall vendor you've got, mall developer. And then when you move to Blaze, we were doing street locations, and so some of those things we learned along the way. And then at Dave's, we walked in with that embedded knowledge and learning. And so that real estate selection process is right. It's like franchise, food quality, never screwing that umbrella up. But then it's franchisee selection, real estate selection. Like those are very interrelated. If you pick the right franchisee, they'll pick the right real estate.
And we've got hundreds of multi-unit, multi-brand operators that have invested and they're franchisees of you and other brands. So we hear that same thing loud and clear, Jim, within the industry. Not only is real estate hyper competitive, it's hyper competitive to find them because they have a choice, just like you're the franchisor of choice, and everybody's
No.
fighting to become that. It's fascinating. Well, we've got a couple of minutes here. We've got a few other questions as it relates to um, uh, responding to the chat, and those are the questions that are coming through. The the thing that what's the one thing that you can impart on our listeners as it relates to um, the one best bit of advice that you've learned that you're practicing every day?
In terms of franchising.
Yeah, in terms of your professional career franchising.
I think walking in their shoes, or like keeping what's important to the franchisee top of mind, making sure that like they're getting what they are trying to get out of the deal, which is ROI. Keeping their priorities top of mind, I think, is probably one of the best lessons to be learned. I think we struggled with that a little bit at Blaze, where we were thinking about building out the portfolio, and franchisees were thinking about each individual store. So when we came to Dave's, we attacked each individual store, while still supporting the portfolio of that franchisee's restaurants.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, we are here telling these untold stories, and thank you, Jim, for your candor. And maybe it was your psychic, the tarot
Wow.
card reader that happened to be at the opening and have tasted it. And when you mentioned it, that's why she said, "Oh my God, this is going to be a life-changing experience for you." So that's pretty cool
Definitely
stuff.
has been, by the way. Definitely has been. So she was right.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
Props to Joyce.
Oh, that's great. Well, this is all about how, your real estate decisions and the systems play into bigger growth. It's all about standards. You've been all over this, from operational standards, menu standards, etc. So we can't thank you enough, Jim. And for our listeners that are here, we still have a few questions that have been unanswered. Please feel free to email me at taj.adhab@leasecake.com. We'll definitely take some of these questions offline, and we look forward to next week's webinar. I think we've got a couple more in the pipeline, so stay tuned. Jim, thanks so much.
Thank you.